You think you know your neighbors, right? I mean, you might not know their last names or what they do for a living, but you see them. You see them get the mail, mow the lawn, pull out of the driveway every morning at 7:45 on the dot. You build this ambient understanding of who they are. They're just part of the scenery, the background characters in the movie of your life. You have a rhythm, this silent agreement to just not interact, that keeps the peace. You nod, they might nod back. It's a simple, unspoken contract based on mutual avoidance. I thought I had that with my neighbor Carol. Oh man, was I wrong? I was so deeply, profoundly wrong. Because that simple contract was about to be shredded, lit on fire, and thrown back in my face over a $10 padlock. You are not going to believe where this goes, because I was there, and I still barely believe it myself. Let me just paint a quick picture of my neighborhood. It's the kind of place real estate agents call charming or full of character. Translation, it's a little older, built in the 60s when houses were modest, but came with decent-sized yards. The trees are these huge, mature oaks and maples, and in the summer, the whole street is covered in this gorgeous leafy canopy. It's quiet. Not dead quiet, but peacefully quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear the ice cream truck from 3 blocks away, a sound that sends every kid under 12 into a Pavlovian frenzy. I've lived in my house for about 8 years. It's a simple 2-bedroom brick ranch. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. The best part is the old wooden privacy fence that wraps around the backyard. It's weathered to that perfect, soft gray color, and it gives me a sense of seclusion, like a little sanctuary in the middle of suburbia. There's a gate on the side of the house, connecting the driveway to the backyard. A simple, unassuming gate made of the same weathered wood. Remember that gate. It's basically the main character in this whole drama, a silent wooden participant in its own bizarre passion play. Now, let's talk about Carol. She lives in the house directly to my left. She's been there forever, one of the original owners on the block. She's retired, and her days seem to run on a very predictable, almost unnervingly precise schedule. There's the 8:00 a.m. newspaper retrieval, the 10:30 a.m. petunia watering, the 1 p.m. mailbox check, and the long afternoon session of sitting on her porch, surveying the neighborhood like a hawk in a rocking chair. Our relationship, if you could even call it that, was built on a finely tuned system of mutually ignoring each other. We weren't enemies, we weren't friends. We were just next to each other. For the first few years, I'd give a friendly hello or a wave when I saw her. Her response was usually this tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Her eyes would flick over to me for a nanosecond before going back to scrutinizing a weed in her lawn or a car going 2 miles over the speed limit. After a while, I just gave up. We settled into a comfortable silence. A silence that, in retrospect, was not comfortable at all. I'd pull into my driveway and just feel her eyes on me from her porch. I'd be gardening and catch a flicker of movement from her living room window. It wasn't overtly hostile. It was just observant. She was a watcher, a sentinel, the warden of her own tiny manicured fiefdom. There were little weird things, of course. Things that, looking back, were not just red flags. They were a full-blown red flag fleet sailing into my harbor. One time, a package was delivered to my front step. It was a new monitor for my computer, a fairly large box. I was on a work call, saw the delivery truck leave, and by the time I went to get it 5 minutes later, it was gone. My heart sank. A porch pirate in our peacefully quiet neighborhood. As I'm about to check my security camera, my doorbell rings. It's Carol, holding my package with both hands, a look of extreme effort on her face. "They left this on your step," she said, her tone flat, almost accusatory, like I'd somehow inconvenienced her by existing and having needs. "Oh, thank you so much for grabbing it, Carol." I was just about to panic, I said, trying to inject some cheer into the transaction. She just stared at me, then at the box, her gaze burning a hole through the cardboard. "You should have a bigger mailbox if you're going to be ordering things of this size," she said. Then she just turned, without another word, and walked away. "No, you're welcome. Nothing. Just a judgment and a retreat." Then there was the trash bin incident. Trash day is Tuesday. I'd roll my bins to the curb Monday night, like a normal person. The next morning, I'd wake up and my bins would be moved. Not far, just shifted about 3 feet to the left, perfectly aligned with the edge of my driveway. Wheels facing the house, lids perfectly closed. The first time it happened, I thought I was losing my mind. The second time, I knew it was her. One morning, I caught her in the act. It was 6 a.m. She was out there in her housecoat and slippers, nudging my recycling bin with her foot until it was in what she obviously considered its cosmically correct position. She was creating order from my chaos, one bin at a time. Another time, I was planting some shrubs along the fence we shared. I'm a meticulous person when it comes to property lines. I had the survey from when I bought the house, and I made sure every single plant was a good foot on my side. I didn't want any trouble. And as I was digging the third hole, I look up and see her standing on her side of the fence, arms crossed. She just watched me for a solid hour. Didn't say a word. The silence was louder than any argument. It was so unnerving. I just kept my head down, finished planting, and practically ran back inside, feeling like I'd just committed some bizarre, unspoken neighborhood crime. My personal favorite, though, was the great leaf caper. I have a big oak tree in my backyard, and in the fall, it sheds. A lot. I do my best to keep things tidy, but leaves have a mind of their own. One windy afternoon, I was watching from my kitchen window as a single, solitary oak leaf fluttered from one of my branches, danced in the wind, and had the absolute audacity to land on her pristine, astroturf green lawn. I saw the curtain on her kitchen window twitch. A minute later, her back door opened. Carol emerged holding a pair of long metal barbecue tongs. She marched with grim purpose to the offending leaf, painstakingly picked it up with the tongs, walked back to the fence line, and dropped it back onto my property. She then went back inside. The whole operation took less than a minute, a stunning display of passive-aggressive efficiency. So that was our baseline. Silent surveillance, bizarre acts of unsolicited help, and brief, awkward encounters that left me feeling vaguely guilty for reasons I couldn't comprehend. I didn't think much of it. I figured every neighborhood has a Carol, a slightly odd, overly particular retiree with too much time on her hands. Little did I know, our silent dance was about to turn into a cage match, and it was all going to start with a quick $10 trip to the hardware store. The decision to buy a lock wasn't some big, dramatic thing. It wasn't born from a single terrifying event. It was more of a slow burn, a creeping sense of unease that had been building for months. The neighborhood Facebook page, usually a gentle stream of lost cats and recommendations for plumbers, had started to get a little more anxious. People were posting about petty thefts. Someone's decorative garden gnomes vanished. Another person's expensive solar path lights got swiped right out of their flower beds. A few streets over, someone had their bike stolen from their back porch. It wasn't a crime wave, but it was enough to plant a little seed of what if. My side gate, the one connecting the driveway to my backyard sanctuary, just swung freely on its hinges. It had a simple latch, but no way to secure it. Anyone could just stroll down the side of my house, unlatch the gate, and have free reign of my backyard. It's not like I have state secrets back there, just a well-loved grill, some slightly faded patio furniture, and a collection of half-dead plants I keep promising to revive. But still, it felt vulnerable. It was an open door I had never bothered to close. So one Saturday, I found myself at the hardware store. My official mission was to buy birdseed and a new furnace filter, the mundane errands of a homeowner. As I was heading to the checkout, I passed the security aisle, and there it was, a wall of locks. Big locks, small locks, Combination locks, keyed locks. My eyes landed on a simple, sturdy-looking brass padlock with a matching hasp. It was classic, no nonsense. It seemed like the most logical, responsible purchase in the world. For $10, I could buy a little peace of mind. It cost less than the bag of birdseed in my cart. I went home feeling weirdly accomplished. I'm not exactly a handyman. My attempts at home repair usually end with a call to an actual professional. But this seemed easy enough. I got out my drill, which I hadn't touched in years. I measured everything twice, then 3 times for good measure. I carefully screwed the hasp into the weathered wood of the gate and the fence post. It looked good. The shiny new metal a stark contrast against the old gray fence. I felt a small surge of pride. Finally, I opened the padlock, slid it through the hasp, and clicked it shut. Click. That sound. It was so crisp and final and deeply satisfying. It was the sound of a boundary being clearly defined, the sound of a vulnerability being erased. I stood back and admired my work for a solid minute. My little sanctuary was now properly enclosed. I thought to myself, there, that's better. It was a small, practical solution to a small, practical problem. It never, ever, not even for a single fleeting microsecond, occurred to me that this simple act, securing my own property with a $10 piece of hardware, was basically a declaration of war in my neighbor's eyes. I had just unknowingly pulled the pin on a grenade of pure, unadulterated absurdity. I had lit the fuse on a bomb I didn't even know was there. The first sign of trouble came the very next day, a beautiful, sunny Sunday afternoon. I was bringing my recycling bin back up the driveway when I saw her. Carol was on her porch, in her usual spot, but something was different. She wasn't rocking. She was stock still, a statue of indignation, staring, laser-focused, at my gate. Her brow was furrowed, her lips pressed into a thin, hard line that could have cut glass. It was a look of pure, analytical disapproval, the kind a food critic gives a dish that has personally offended them. I just kept my head down, pretending I didn't notice, and rolled the bin to the side of the house. But the feeling of her stare was like a physical weight on my back. Why would she care about a lock on my gate? It had absolutely nothing to do with her. It was on my fence, securing my yard. The logic was inescapable. Or so I thought, but that was just the start. The overture. The next morning, she was at her mailbox at the exact same time as me. This wasn't unusual. Our schedules were eerily synchronized. But today, she wasn't just getting her mail. She was waiting for me. She had something to say. "Morning," I said, keeping it brief, hoping to just grab my bills and retreat. She shuffled through a stack of circulars, then looked up, her eyes flicking from my face to the gate and back again, a movement so quick it was almost subliminal. "Oh," she said, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet fake surprise. "A lock, that's new." "Yep," I said, not wanting to get into it. I fumbled with my car keys. "Just adding a little security." She gave this short, humorless laugh, a little puff of air that was pure contempt. "Security," she repeated, drawing the word out as if it were the most ridiculous, pretentious thing she had ever heard. "Security, in this neighborhood." She shook her head in this slow, deliberate gesture of profound disappointment, as if I had personally lowered the property values for the entire Tri-County area. Then she turned and walked back to her house. I just stood there, car keys in my hand, feeling weirdly defensive and confused. What was that all about? It felt less like a conversation and more like a warning shot. It escalated. Every single time I went in or out of the gate, I could feel her watching. I'd be fumbling with the key to unlock it, and I'd catch the twitch of a curtain in her front window. It started to feel less like she was observing and more like she was documenting, building a case against— What? Against my desire to not have my grill stolen? I had no idea. Then came the note. About a week after the lock went on, I came home from work to find a small piece of paper, folded neatly in half, tucked under the padlock itself. The paper was cheap, lined notebook paper, torn raggedly from a spiral. The handwriting was tight and spidery and slanted aggressively to the left. It said, simply, "This is not necessary." No signature. It didn't need one. I knew exactly who it was from. I crumpled the note in my fist and threw it in the trash as soon as I got inside. I was no longer confused. I was angry. This was my home, my property, the one place on earth where I'm supposed to feel safe and in control. This was some ridiculous power trip, and I wasn't going to fold. If she had a real problem, she could talk to me like a normal person, a functioning adult. Little did I know, she was about to, and it was going to be 1,000 times worse than any creepy anonymous note. The battle lines had been drawn, and I had chosen my side. The lock was staying. The breaking point, the moment this Cold War turned hot, came that Saturday. The weather was perfect, and I was trying to enjoy it. I was out in the flower bed right along the shared fence line, headphones in, listening to a podcast, trying to be in my own little world. But I could just sense a presence, you know? That prickling on the back of your neck. I glanced up, and there she was, standing on her side of the fence, arms crossed, face like thunder. She looked like a Roman general surveying a rebellious province. I let out a long, weary sigh and pulled my earbuds out. "Can I help you, Carol?" I asked, making a conscious effort to keep my voice even and non-confrontational. "You need to take that lock off your gate," she said. No hello, no preamble, just a blunt, unadorned command. I was honestly taken aback by the sheer audacity. I stood up, wiping dirt on my jeans, and decided to try reason first, to appeal to the logical human I hoped was buried somewhere deep inside her. "I'm sorry, what?" "The lock," she repeated, gesturing with her head toward the gate as if it were a dead rat I'd left on her porch. "On the gate. It needs to go. Now." "Carol, with all due respect, it's my gate, on my property. It doesn't affect you in any way." A weird, triumphant little smile crept onto her face. It was the smile of someone who believes they are holding a royal flush. "That's where you're wrong," she said, her voice filled with this smug, unshakable certainty. "It affects me directly. You are illegally blocking my access." "Access? Access to what? My rusty grill? My collection of half-dead petunias? Your access? Carol, this is my private backyard." "I have a right to be there," she declared, puffing her chest out slightly. "I have what's called a prescriptive easement." She said prescriptive easement like she was a seasoned lawyer revealing a surprise witness at a murder trial. She had clearly been on Google, armed with a legal term she barely understood but was prepared to wield like a weapon. I, on the other hand, actually knew what it meant from the mountain of paperwork I had to read when I bought the house. "A prescriptive easement?" I repeated slowly, buying time. "And what exactly does this supposed easement grant you access to do?" "To cut through," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "I have been cutting through your yard to get to the park for 15 years. It saves me 5 minutes. You can't just block a right-of-way that's been established for that long." I looked it up. "It's the law." I just stared at her, my brain trying to process the absurdity. I had lived in this house for 8 years. I worked from home 3 days a week. I had never, not once, not ever, seen this woman set foot in my yard. Was she some kind of ghost? A suburban ninja who only traversed my lawn under the cover of darkness? "Carol," I said, and I could feel my patience getting dangerously thin. "Let me be very clear. First of all, you have never cut through my yard. I've been here for 8 years and have motion-activated cameras. I would know. Secondly, to claim a prescriptive easement, a whole list of conditions has to be met, including the use being open and notorious, which, since I've never seen you, it hasn't been. And a 5-minute shortcut to the park doesn't magically create a legal right. And most importantly," I paused for emphasis, "I have the property survey from when I bought the house. I had it done specifically so I would know where the lines are. There are no easements, prescriptive or otherwise, on my property." This yard is my private property. End of story. I expected her to back down when faced with actual facts. I did not expect her to double down with the fury of a cornered badger. Her face went blotchy red. "You and your documents!" she scoffed, spitting the word out like it was poison. "Some things are more important than papers. This is about neighborly conduct. This is about common decency. And what you are doing is hostile and aggressive." "Locking my own gate is hostile?" I asked, my voice finally rising to match hers. "What's hostile is you demanding I leave my property unsecured to save you a few minutes on your walk. What's hostile is leaving me creepy, unsigned notes on my gate. What's hostile is you spying on me from your window for 8 years. I am a senior citizen," she suddenly yelled, throwing her hands up as if presenting herself for martyrdom. "You are creating a hazard for me. What if there's an emergency? What if I need to get through?" This was getting more surreal by the second. "An emergency that specifically requires you to cut through my backyard? Carol, you have a front door and a perfectly good sidewalk that leads to the exact same park." "You are not going to get away with this," she hissed, her eyes narrowing into slits. "You think you're so smart with your locks and your surveys and your documents? We'll see. We will just see what the law has to say about this." And with that final, ominous threat, she spun on her heel and stormed back to her house. I watched her go, my heart pounding with adrenaline and disbelief. She had threatened to get the law involved. I figured she meant she was going to waste a few $100s on a lawyer who would tell her she was crazy. It never, in my wildest, most fantastical dreams, occurred to me that her interpretation of getting the law involved meant calling 911. About an hour later, maybe a little more, the adrenaline had subsided, and I was in my kitchen making a sandwich, trying to shake off the sheer weirdness of the encounter. And then I heard it. A siren. It was faint at first, then got louder and louder, and it wasn't passing by. It was stopping. Right outside. A cold, hard knot formed in the pit of my stomach. I crept over to my front window and peeked through the blinds. My heart just dropped. A police car was parked at the curb, directly between my house and hers. Its lights were silently flashing, painting the street in pulsing strokes of red and blue. I thought, no, she didn't. She couldn't have. It's just a coincidence. Oh, but she did. And it wasn't. A police officer got out of the driver's side and started walking, with a very weary gait, right up my driveway. My mind was racing. What do I do? What do I say? I decided to just meet him head-on. Project an aura of calm, responsible, non-crazy homeowner. I opened my front door before he even had a chance to knock. The officer, a tall guy who looked like he'd seen it all and was deeply tired by it, saw me and stopped. "Afternoon," he said. "We got a call about a property dispute?" He said, "property dispute," with the same enthusiasm a person might say, "root canal." "I think I know why you're here," I said, gesturing with my head towards Carol's house. "It's about the new lock on my side gate, isn't it?" As if on cue, summoned by the mere mention of her, Carol's front door flew open. She marched out onto her lawn with a sense of theatrical purpose, pointing a trembling finger at my gate. "There, officers! That's it! He's locked me out! He has illegally blocked my right-of-way. I am being held prisoner on my own property." She was putting on a full performance, the damsel in distress. A second, younger officer got out of the passenger side. He looked from the gate to me and then to Carol. He had a face that was a perfect, beautiful mix of utter confusion and, "I cannot believe this is a real call." The first officer turned back to me, ignoring her outburst for a moment. "Okay, sir. Can you walk me through what's going on?" So I did, calmly, methodically. "This is my property. I have lived here for 8 years. I installed a fence and gate for security. And last week I added a padlock because of some recent petty theft in the neighborhood." "My neighbor," I said, nodding towards the performer on the lawn. believes she has a right to cut through my yard to get to the park. She's claiming something called a prescriptive easement. As I said the words, the officer's eyebrows shot up. He'd clearly heard this one before. It was a bingo square on his ridiculous neighbor dispute card. I checked my property records when I bought the house, and I have the survey, I continued, keeping my voice low and steady. There is no easement of any kind on my property. It is my private property. I tried to explain this to her earlier, but she was insistent. Then she threatened to call the law. And well, here you are. The officer nodded slowly, then turned his attention to Carol. Ma'am, what's your side of the story? Carol launched into a soap opera monologue. I have lived here for 40 years, she began, her voice quivering with manufactured emotion. For 15 of those years I have used that path. It is an established right-of-way. He just moved in 8 years ago. And he put up that lock out of pure spite. It's a hostile act. I am a senior citizen. I don't feel safe. The younger officer was now visibly trying not to smile. He turned away and became intensely interested in a very interesting spot on the pavement. Ma'am, did you ever have a written agreement with the previous owner to use this path? The older officer asked patiently. An agreement? We were neighbors. We had an understanding, she exclaimed, as if a written contract was a vulgar insult. Right, the officer said flatly. He walked over to the gate, gave the $10 padlock a little jiggle, then looked at the fence, and finally back at me. This is your fence on your property line, correct, sir? Yes, sir. It's about a foot inside my line. I can get the plat map from my office if you'd like to see it. That won't be necessary, he said, turning back toward Carol. He had seen enough. The curtain was about to fall on her one-act play. The senior officer took a slow, deep breath, the kind a parent takes before explaining for the 10th time why you can't have ice cream for breakfast. He turned his full attention to Carol, who was standing there expectantly, a flicker of triumph in her eyes, as if waiting for him to pull out his handcuffs and arrest me for the crime of owning a fence. Ma'am, he began, his voice calm but firm, a tone that brooked no argument. I understand you're upset. However, this is not a police matter. This is a civil issue. Carol's face just fell. The triumphant gleam vanished, replaced by sheer disbelief. Civil? But he broke the law. He's blocking my access. No, ma'am. He has not broken any criminal law, the officer clarified, his patience clearly draining away like sand through a sieve. This is his fence on his property. As the legal owner, he has the right to secure it by locking a gate. He can put a lock on every gate he owns. Calling 911 because your neighbor locked his own gate is not an appropriate use of emergency services. The younger officer, sensing his moment, chimed in, his face now a mask of professional seriousness. If you genuinely believe you have a legal right-of-way, your only recourse is to pursue it in civil court. You'd have to hire a real estate attorney and file a lawsuit to have an easement legally recognized. The police cannot and will not force him to unlock his gate. We simply don't have the authority. The silence that followed was monumental. It was so thick and heavy and exquisitely awkward you could have cut it into cubes and built a house with it. Carol just stood there on her perfect lawn, her mouth slightly open, a fish out of water. She had played her trump card, called in the cavalry, and it had backfired spectacularly. She had expected a public victory, a vindication of her rights in front of the whole neighborhood. Instead, she got a public lecture on basic property law and a reprimand for wasting police time. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. I just stood there by my front door, trying my absolute best not to look smug. But I'm pretty sure a little smile was tugging at the corner of my mouth. The senior officer gave Carol one last long look. Do we have an understanding, ma'am? Do not call 911 for this again. It's a waste of our time and your credibility. Carol just gave a stiff, jerky little nod. Her face was a frozen mask of humiliation. Defeated, she turned without another word, marched back into her house, and slammed the door. The sound echoed down the quiet street like a gunshot. The older officer turned to me and gave a slight shake of his head, a gesture that said, "Sorry you have to live next to that." "Sorry to have bothered you, sir," he said. "Not at all," I managed to say. "Thank you for your time." They got in their car and drove away, the flashing lights disappearing down the street. The neighborhood went back to being quiet. But it was a different kind of quiet now. It was a quiet, charged with the lingering energy of the most bizarre, unnecessary, and deeply, deeply awkward confrontation of my entire life. After the police car disappeared, a strange, profound quiet descended on the street. I went back inside, my heart still beating a little too fast from the mix of anger and vindication. I walked to my kitchen window and looked out at the infamous gate. The sun was shining, a bird was chirping, and the brass padlock was still there. A tiny $10 symbol of a very, very stupid conflict. It looked so small and insignificant. It was hard to believe it had just been the subject of an emergency police dispatch. In the days and weeks that followed, a new normal set in. A much, much colder normal. Carol's rocking chair on the porch remained empty. The silent surveillance completely stopped. The twitching curtain in the front window was still. It was like she had vanished into thin air. We went from being neighbors who didn't talk to being neighbors who aggressively didn't talk. It was a whole new level of avoidance. If I was getting out of my car and she pulled into her driveway, she would literally sit in her running car, staring straight ahead, until I was safely inside my house before she would get out. If we happened to be at our mailboxes at the same time, a palpable force field of awkwardness would spring up between us. We were strangers again, but strangers with a shared, deeply weird history, which is infinitely more complicated. Looking back on it now, the whole thing is just absurd. It's a story about how a simple misunderstanding, fueled by a stubborn sense of entitlement and about 15 minutes of bad internet research, can escalate into a 911 call. It's a total, catastrophic breakdown of basic human communication. If she had just come over at the very beginning, knocked on my door and asked, "Hey, I'm just curious, why'd you put a lock on the gate?" Maybe we could have had a weird conversation, but at least it would have been a conversation. I could have explained about the thefts, and maybe she would have understood. But she didn't want a conversation. She wanted compliance. This whole ridiculous episode also taught me a valuable lesson. Know your rights as a homeowner. Know your property lines down to the inch. Have your documents in order. Because while most neighbors are reasonable people just trying to live their lives, every now and then you run into someone who is operating in their own private reality, governed by their own set of bizarre, self-serving laws. And when that happens, having the cold, hard facts on your side is your best and only defense. The great gate just fizzled out. There was no apology, no more notes, no more confrontations, just a heavy, lingering, permanent silence. The fence between our yards might as well be the Berlin Wall now. And every single time I click that brass padlock open or closed, I can't help but shake my head and smile a little. It's a constant reminder that sometimes the craziest, most unbelievable stories aren't in the movies or on TV. They're happening right next door, just a few feet away. So that's my crazy neighbor story. It's funny now in a shake-my-head-and-laugh kind of way, but at the moment, it was just unbelievably stressful. I have to know, am I alone here? Have you ever had a fight with a neighbor over something completely and utterly ridiculous? A misplaced trash bin? A single leaf? A $10 lock? Drop your stories in the comments below. Let's all share in the collective insanity of neighborhood life. I promise it'll make me feel a lot less crazy. And if you enjoyed this story and my descent into suburban madness, do me a huge favor and hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed for more stories. It really helps the channel a lot. Thanks for sticking with me through this wild ride. I'll see you in the next one.